Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Mistress of the Damned. I am your Mistress Katrina. How are you doing today? Glad to see you here. If you are new to my channel, this is where I review my enormous library of books that is not currently behind me because I am prepping for new flooring. And I tell you what the story is. I want in kind of a synopsis and I review it and I tell you whatever is running through my mind while I am going through my review notes. So if you like books and you aren't sure what to read next, or you just kind of want a synopsis of a book of a week, hit that subscribe button, like and share my videos, leave me comments or recommendations in the comments. This week's book is American Nations, boom, by Colin Woodard. It's a history of the 11 rival regional cultures of North America. The premise of this book is that we are not the United States of America, so much as a loose conglomeration of nations, independent nations held together by tradition and the Constitution, sort of. So first, a couple of definitions, because these are really relevant to the points he's making. A state is a sovereign political entity like the United Kingdom, Kenya, Panama, or New Zealand that is eligible for membership in the United Nations and inclusion on maps. So it's a political entity, okay? A nation is a group of people who share, or believe they share, common culture, ethnic origin, language, historical experience, artifacts, and symbols. A lot of places very conveniently are one and the same. So like France, okay, it's both a sovereign political entity and it's a group of people who share a common culture. But then you've got the United States, a massively immigration-filled nation, right? So using those metrics, Woodard identifies 11 stateless nations that comprise the North American continent, focusing specifically on America, but it does include Canada and Mexico because we're all part of it. So first up, we have Yankeedom. Yankeedom is essentially the New England states, including New York State, but excluding New York City. Northern Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and the eastern parts of North and South Dakota. Yankeedom emphasizes education, all right? They believe in political control, the greater good ideology at the expense of self-interest. Yankees believe that government can improve everyone's life. I have no idea why they believe this. There's been very little proof of that, but they believe it, so there you go. New Netherlands is the New York City, and it's New York City and the northern part of New Jersey. It's a global trading society with a profound tolerance of diversity and an unflinching commitment to the freedom of inquiry. Okay, all right, I guess I buy that. The Midlands was founded by Quakers. This is the Maryland, Eastern Maryland, South New Jersey, middle parts of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, and Indiana, Northern Missouri, North and South Dakota, Kansas, Mid-Eastern Nebraska, Kansas, North and Northwest Oklahoma, so that kind of panhandle area of Oklahoma. The Midlands sees government as an unwelcome intrusion. It's an ethnic mosaic, it's multicultural before that concept got hijacked by the PC crowd. Midlanders are skeptical of top-down government intervention. They just want to live and let live. They just want the government to leave them the hell alone. I appreciate that sentiment, all right? Tidewater was a powerful section during the Revolution. This is essentially the planter class of Virginia, Southeast Maryland, and Eastern North Carolina. And it was founded by landed gentry of the colonial America. It's very loosely based on England and their inheritance laws. They have a high value on respect for authority and tradition, very little value on equality or public participation in politics. I'm almost certain that it was representatives from Virginia who said that only people who own property should be able to vote. Some days I agree with that sentiment, but not usually. The next region is the Greater Appalachian, which he also calls their inhabitants borderlanders. This was basically founded by the lowland Scots and displaced Irish, most of whom have a very strong warrior ethic. They're Celts, and they're descended from Vikings. So it makes sense that they're going to be the fighter class, if you will. It's an enormous swath of middle America. It's southern Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, the western part of Virginia, western North Carolina, northern South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, most of Tennessee, part of Missouri, and northern Texas. Those are the northern parts of South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and Louisiana. The southern parts are in an entirely different country. Appalachians are they're a warrior ethic. They have a deep commitment to individual liberty and personal sovereignty. Basically, like, not joking when I say they are the warrior class. A huge chunk of our armed forces comes from this swath of America. And basically, they hate everyone who is not an Appalachian. They hold equal disregard for Yankee teachers, Tidewater lords, and deep Southern aristocrats. They just, if you're not an Appalachian, blank you, man. They want nothing to do with you. Now, the Deep South, this is South Carolina, basically all of South Carolina. Florida, except for the very, very tip, which it's almost its own little region there. It's got southern parts of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, into eastern Texas. That's the Deep South. And this area was founded by Barbados slave lords. Basically, it's a bastion of white supremacy, according to the author. It's built on a caste system that reigns to the present day, and it remains a bastion of states' rights movements, which is not a bad thing. But this is also where African American culture comes from, which makes sense, that being where most of the slaves were imported was to the Deep South. New France is largely located in Canada, but there is a tiny little enclave of it in the southern part of Louisiana, right around New Orleans and Baton Rouge, that remained after the Louisiana Purchase during the Jefferson administration. Now, New Francophiles tend to be down-to-earth, egalitarian, and consensus-driven, by far the most liberal people on the continent. Not sure if I agree with that one, but whatever. El Norte is the oldest nation, excepting the First Nations, on the continent. This was founded by the Spanish conquistadors. This area supports democratic reform and revolutionary sentiment. They are independent, self-sufficient, adaptable, and work-centered. El Norte is comprised of all of the northern states of Mexico, southwest California, southern Arizona, and Texas, and then the central parts of New Mexico and up into southern Colorado. The left coast is essentially the coastal areas of California, Washington, and Oregon, excluding Los Angeles and San Diego because those fall under El Norte. The left coast was founded by Yankees, and consequently it shares many of the same qualities, with the exclusion of believing that the Bible will save us all, and the addition of believing in personal self-fulfillment. But beyond that, they're basically identical, and they've remained political allies from the left coast's inception. The First Nations is the extreme north of Canada and has full independence from European cultures, being that it is run and in the hands of the Native American tribes in Canada. The last coast, my people, not coast country, my people, the far west. This is northern Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, eastern California, eastern Washington, Oregon, western North and South Dakota, and then up into the Canadian provinces of British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and then Alaska. Those are all part of our country here in the west, the far west. The nation of the far west, yes. Basically, this area would not exist if it hadn't been for corporate interests. It's just an extremely inhospitable area. It's desert. It's largely just desert, right? There's not a whole lot here. It's not good for farming. It's barely good for ranching. The only thing that really could take place here are the railroads buzzing through while they drop off mining equipment and oil rigs, okay? And then government programs in the form of military bases and military research, which is interesting because generally speaking, people in the far west have a libertarian bent, which fucking hates the government. Okay, that's not fair. I shouldn't say that. Hating the government makes it sound like we're all going to rebel, and we're not. That would probably be Appalachian. But yeah, we just also want the government to leave us the hell alone. Well, it's an interesting premise. It really was. And Woodard gave a brief rundown of history on the North American continent, largely removing the left-right dichotomy of modern politics, and kind of retells the story of our continent through the lens of these different nations and their shifting beliefs and values. It added nuance to history, which frequently gets lost or buried under, Democrat this, Republican that. Something I noticed while reading it, and it was interesting, and I actually had to look up Colin Woodard on Wikipedia to see if I was right, and I am. You might be shocked to learn that he's a Yankee. And that bias becomes really obvious while reading this book, is basically everything good comes from Yankeedom in the left coast, with nods of approval for the Midlands, El Norte, while the Tidewaters, Deep South, and Appalachians are basically derided for everything bad, with absolutely no acknowledgement that anything good could have possibly come out of those regions. I mean, again, state rights are not bad. Gun rights are not bad. Sorry. Gun rights are how we the people defend ourselves from you, the overreaching Yankees. And I'm pretty sure that he hates the far West because of our support for corporate interests over federal interests. And, you know, I just got to say, as a far Westerner, I am a cyberpunk girl living in a cyberpunk world, meaning my corporations own your federal government. So, right there, buddy. I'm not sure if I like this one. Like I said, it added some interesting detail to history to, instead of going, oh, the left and the right, and this side is headed here, to provide the background of the regional differences and how they fought in the various wars, in both the Revolution, the Civil War, all the way up through the World Wars and everything else. And that was interesting to see, but ultimately, like I said, his bias was showing. And I like my history without bias. Okay, history is what it is. That's the nice thing about history, is it really doesn't change. It is what it is. Okay, when you feel like you need to put your own spin on it, you've strayed off the path of a historian. There should not be spin on history. Everybody knows just how horrible the Nazis were. Like I said when I was reviewing my video on my book on Mao Zedong, even the Nazis know how bad the Nazis are. They just wish they could have killed everybody a little bit faster so nobody would be around to complain about it. Yankees seem to have absolutely no fucking idea how terrible they are and how bad government overreach is. But maybe that's just my, far western hood talking. My far western statehood talking. Partisanship. He kept it out mostly. Mostly it was just Yankee good, and like I said, his Yankee was showing. I mean, no giggity. That's not a Quagmire sex reference. His preferences were stated with implicit bias throughout the entire last section. I think he made some interesting points. I might even buy his premise because it's fairly well stated, and it's not like he just thought this up out of thin air. There are reference works he pulled from that support that idea, that he cited, and he noted everything out. I mean, from that perspective, it's a well-annotated book, but there's a lot of surface to this idea, and the author just kind of barely scratched it for me. So that's it for this week. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like and share my video. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next week when I am plunging into the basics of finance with Investing 101 by Michelle Kagan. Bye.